Welcome to the WJTV 12 Lieutenant Governor Digital Debate Show. I'm Byron Brown.
And I'm Melanie Christopher. Thank you for joining us. We are joined by Alan Lang with Y'all Politics and Adam Ganeshow with Mississippi Today. I know I've said your name 100 times and I say it different every time. I guess we want to ask first, gentlemen, was there a winner tonight? Alan, we'll start with you.
Well, I think they came in looking to do two really different things. Delbert Hoseman came in essentially to look the part, to kind of present to people who already know him that he's ready for the job. Jay Hughes, less known. He's a first-term state representative from Oxford. He's spent a bunch of money on TV. He's worked real hard campaigning around the state of Mississippi. So he's trying to really sell himself to a lot of people who've just never seen him or know him in any real way, other than they know that he's a Democrat who's really passionate about education. And so at some level, I think they both accomplished their missions. You know, it got a little chippy at points, but I think they both accomplished what they generally set out to do.
Adam, how do you feel?
I thought that they both raised a lot of the same points. I expected sort of that these two men would come in and sort of go at each other. You know, they have had sort of a chippy campaign up to this point. Especially, I think Jay Hughes released his first digital ad in January of this year, and it was like half of it was, I'm Jay Hughes, I'm introducing myself to voters. The second half of it was an attack ad in January, which is pretty unheard of. I mean, that's so early. So I thought that maybe they might go at each other on some of these issues. I'd walk away from tonight's debate thinking that they really didn't differentiate themselves on most issues. There were a few that, you know, as Alan mentioned, you know, it got a little bit chippy at times, but I really kind of expected more of that.
More alike than different, then.
That's right. That's right. I had a running list here. You know, they both talked about the importance of transparency in government. As a reporter, that's a big deal. I mean, you know, we've struggled at times to have access to what's going on in state government, whether it be through open meetings or you know, Records Act or whatever. Gas tax increase. Both of them at least acknowledged that they would consider it. You know, Delbert Hoseman tonight, for the first time, rolled out his specific gas tax increase. I'm sure we'll get to that. Don't want to jump the gun yet. But Jay Hughes himself, you know, he didn't say anything against, you know, at least considering it. No rainy day fund for infrastructure. They both want to expand Medicaid in some way. They want the state flag to be left up to the people of Mississippi, and they don't really think it's the legislature's job to do it. Teacher pay, they both want to increase teacher salaries. I mean, there's a long list here that I sort of expected maybe a little bit more contention between the two of them, and we never really got that.
Yeah. Same feeling?
Yeah, generally, yeah. I mean, I think so. I mean, I think, you know, Hughes has a harder kind of electoral hill to climb, A, from just a name ID perspective, but B, just, you know, by the fact that his party is you know, less active in the state. He just doesn't have the same level of support, and so kind of being the same is almost problematic for Hughes in some ways, because there's no differentiation. You know, if it's a like versus like sort of situation, you know, somebody who has a whole lot more name ID in the form of Delbert Hoseman has a pretty prohibitive advantage.
And when Congressman Michael Guest endorsed Hoseman, does that make a big difference, or is that,
you know, whether or not it makes a big difference, I think it helps. I think, you know, certainly you're going to see through the pendency of the last 7 weeks of this campaign, I think Republicans are going to generally try to remind people, you know, certainly about the national politics, certainly about, you know, what's going on in Washington, D.C., and brand themselves, you know, respectively here in Mississippi, that there is a difference between Republicans and Democrats. I think, you know, things like that help. And you know, whether or not we've seen in the U.S. Senate race last year, you know, Mike Espy, you know, a lot of people were out there endorsing folks. It does make a big difference, you know, who brings their endorsement to the race.
They talked about how they would lead the legislature, and of course this is such an important position. Let's take a listen to what they had to say here.
Teachers don't just work half a day, half a year. Their work just starts many times when other people go home. So I would like to see everybody on the education committee go and shadow a teacher from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, and do that in an A district, in a C district, and a failing district. Because what we need to do is recognize what Governor Haley Barbour said back in 2008 at the State of the State. The single greatest economic investment we can make is quality public education.
We'll be going over the rules with our senators to see who has experience and who can best serve and who wants to be in that role. That's not going to be a part-time role. They're going to have to work all summer long when we do our legislation going into the session. I want most of the bills written before then. The other thing is we're going to have transparency. And not only do I want to webcast the actual Senate hearings, I want to do all the committee hearings so people can see their government at work. They can see those committee members, and not only who the chairman is, but all the members.
All right, Adam, let's start with you. Hughes's plan for how he will lead the legislature, of course, education being that number one thing.
That's
shadowing teachers.
That's his big policy. That has been from day one. I think 3 years ago is when Jay Hughes bought his RV that he calls the Imagine Wagon with his face on the side of it and started touring the state, mostly going to talk to educators at first. And you know, that was the key to his campaign. I think his slogan to this day is it all starts with education. In the Capitol, you know, covering the last few legislative sessions, it's been a pretty standard talking point from Democrats who serve in the legislature that the Republican legislative leadership, particularly as it pertains to education, have not necessarily stayed in touch with the educators across the state. I think maybe that's what you're hearing when you hear Jay Hughes pitch, hey, we're going to put everyone on the education committee in the classroom in an AAC and an F district. I think that's what you're hearing from him. And then for Secretary of State Hosemann, I mean, he, you know, I think both of these candidates for sure have some very strong ideas about how they want to lead in the Senate. Secretary Hosemann particularly, I think, is no nonsense, and he has this grand vision of exactly how he would lead that chamber. Talking specifically about committee members, you know, committee chairman rather, it's not going to be a part-time job. You're going to have to work through the summer. That's not completely unheard of now. I mean, it's not like that's not happening to some extent, but it sounds like he wants to kind of come in and rule sort of with a tougher authority.
Alan, on Hosemann, he did seem to say that he wanted things to be right up at the beginning, things happening instead of at the last minute.
Yeah, the standard kind of legislative process is to almost, you know, run the car into the wall. You know, what we call conference weekend, which usually happens, you know, a week to 10 days before the legislative session ends. And you know, Hosemann seems to want to tackle some of the revenue issues earlier and try to get some of the bigger picture things out of the way. That seems to be what he's telegraphing, at least in terms of how he would run the body. It would be very different. I mean, it would be very different than currently how the House and Senate currently operate.
Well, another big topic is teacher pay, because we've been talking about education, and here's how they responded on teacher pay.
I want to do it at the beginning of the year. Our teacher pay raises will start the process. In addition to that, there are other things. There's I want to do pre-K. We need to there were 19 collaboratives funded last year for pre-K. I want to fund all 50 so we can start our students earlier, so our teachers will have educated children when they're coming into the school system. So there are a lot of things there. The amount, it depends entirely on how much we've got to spend in Mississippi, but it'll be a meaningful raise every single year.
It's not just teacher pay. It is also respect, but it's also all of our other state employees who haven't had a raise in 11 years. I think it's a bigger issue. I think that we've got to look at education as a whole, and we've got to get back to common sense instead of common core. We need less standardized testing. We need better pay for everyone that's in the school system, not just teachers. And we need to fund the classrooms instead of the cronies and the testing companies. And last but not least, and we need a new state superintendent of education.
So, Adam, when you hear that, do you think we're going to get some serious teacher pay increases here, the way that both of them are talking?
One way or the other?
Either candidate wins this, I think that will truly be one of their top priorities. I mean, you know, hearing Secretary Hosemann say this is my first priority, I mean, that's strong language coming from you know, his side, and then, of course we know where Jay Hughes stands on that as well. But what I also heard from them is sort of their answers to those questions were, yeah, of course, teacher pay, we're going to get that done. And I think they're earnest when they say that. But both of them immediately moved on to sort of some bigger picture things, with Jay Hughes talking about, hey, this is about the entire education system, public education system. You have other salaried employees who haven't gotten raises as well. Let's look at the Department of Education. Let's look at the Superintendent of Education. That was one of the most striking things I heard throughout the whole debate. Then you have Secretary Hosemann, who says, yeah, teacher pay, cool, we're going to get it done, but then moves right into talking about funding pre-K, pre-kindergarten education, which has been an initiative that I think the current Republican leadership has wished they could have gotten to the last few years, but they never quite did. So you're hearing both of these candidates say, yep, teacher pay, cool, let's make it happen. But also there are some bigger picture things dealing with funding for education.
All right. Well, Gerald Harris now is with Jay Hughes, kind of getting his reaction about the debate. Let's listen to what he had to say. Gerald?
Yeah, that's right, Byron. I'm here with the Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor, Jay Hughes. Now, future Lieutenant Governor, he wants to be. Talk to me about tonight's debate. Did you accomplish what you needed to do?
Yes, what I wanted to do was actually let people hear directly from me on how I felt about issues, where I stand, what my story is. My story is like a whole lot of other Mississippians, and I identify with them. I understand their real problems and real issues are what we need instead of talking points. I think the most interesting thing that I was able to do was go without my cell phone for 30 whole minutes. That's the longest since I started this campaign.
Now, with this, you all did express some similar views on a number of key issues. Is there any difference between you and Secretary Hosemann?
Absolutely. I don't owe $3 million worth of campaign donor favors. Those issues are my issues. I've been fighting for these for the last 4 years as loud as I could. And so what is the key difference? That I'm real, I'm transparent, I will find compromise, and it's not going to be with lobbyists and campaign donors.
How confident are you, if you are elected Lieutenant Governor, you're going to have a Republican legislature? How will you get things done?
The same way I always have, but by doing the same thing that I do in my marriage and in my business, and it's called compromise and respect. There's nothing new about one party being in charge of a Senate and another party controlling the Senate. That's been happening for 250 years in America. So what I would do is find out what's important to each of them. The safety factor out there for those that are concerned that, oh my God, it'll be some liberal agenda. First, I'm not that way. But second, whatever it is that I want done is going to have to be passed through a Republican Senate.
All right, that's Representative Jay Hughes. Thank you so much for joining us. He's taking on Secretary of State Delbert Hoseman, November 5th. Mel and Byron, back to you.
All right, thank you, Gerald. Alan, you heard what did you think of Jay Hughes' response and how he did tonight? How he thinks he did based on what he's saying?
Again, I think as we alluded to earlier, his goal is to try to get to know Mississippians, or have Mississippians get to know him a little bit more. This is an interesting opportunity. He's spent a lot of his own money. He alluded that Secretary Hosemann has raised about $3 million. I think this is a great opportunity for him to break through and talk directly to the people in Mississippi that may not have seen him or may not be from his area of the state, people on the coast, people in different parts of the state. So from that perspective, yeah, I think he did exactly what he wanted to do tonight. Delbert Hoseman has a real long list of accomplishments. You probably argue that he's probably the most accomplished Secretary of State, and so you heard Delbert Hoseman kind of peeling off policy during the pendency of the debate. Hughes's pitch right now is a little bit more emotional, a little bit more, hey, things aren't right, hey, we can do better, and I think that's really where he's kind of resting his political hopes in this cycle.
He portrays himself as kind of everyman, like he really truly
he wants to connect his background, his humble roots, and so on and so forth.
Do you see a big difference between the two in that?
Not really. Again, Delbert Hoseman's a really known quantity, right? So he's been Secretary of State since 2007. A lot of people remember the old lady on the bench commercial, and that was kind of iconic, and that kind of cemented his image in the minds of Mississippians. So I don't think Delbert has an image problem, with regards to the common man. excuse me, with regards to the common man. I just don't think that's his issue, but it's certainly something that Hughes is trying to exploit.
Yeah, he was saying that he had the plastic spoon and Delbert was the silver spoon.
Right,
do you think that, Adam, do you think that had any resonance there?
I really enjoyed Delbert's response to that when you turned it back over to him, saying, I think your mother would have had a problem with that, or whatever he said. But I don't know, the common man approach is interesting. I think in the gubernatorial election, you're seeing Jim Hood try to stake that claim as well. Look, the reality is that we live in a political time that's very nationalized. I think a lot of the people who are watching this debate are immediately turning off JTV. Hopefully not until after this post show, but they're going to turn on the Democratic presidential debate, the third one tonight. That's how we are now. I mean, as a people, and you're getting all of this national partisanship on a nightly basis in most cases. For Democrats in Mississippi to make this argument that, hey, I'm not gonna, like Representative Hughes just said, hey, I'm not gonna be this crazy liberal. I'm gonna have to work with the Republican legislature. Like I said, we're seeing sort of that same sentiment from Jim Hood in the governor's race as well. We'll see if Mississippians resonate with those points. I'd question that, but we'll see how it plays out in November.
What do you?
Go ahead.
What do you think voters are looking for when they watch these debates, and what are they watching for out of these candidates?
I mean, I think they're looking to see themselves. I think they're looking to see, how these candidates reflect themselves back to voters, and do people identify with their values with regards to social issues and economic issues and the like. But I mean, it's a real simple answer, but I think they're looking to see themselves.
Mm-hmm.
As I've talked to voters across the state, really the last 2 years, of course, last year with the federal midterm elections, I really wonder if the line of, hey, like I just said, this nationalization of politics and how nasty it really seems to have gotten there. I wonder if, someone like Jay Hughes or Jim Hood, when they make this pitch, like, hey, we might not be of the same party, but we all agree as Mississippians that there are these problems, XYZ problems, and these are my solutions to fix those. So I wonder if that's possible here in Mississippi, if that message can resonate.
Well, I think another thing that we think we can all agree on is that infrastructure needs work here in this state, and that was one thing that they talked about too. So let's take a listen as to what they said.
What I'm going to propose is a local option use tax. That means that every county will be able to determine whether or not they want to raise tax on gasoline, diesel, or gasoline, either one. I want to push our economy back to the counties. Mississippi's running the counties. It's not running the capital. Why take money in here and charge 5, 10, or 20% overhead when the real need is at the local level? There are 436 bridges out. Those bridges are in the counties.
If Amazon can figure out how to get my dog's treats to my front door, then they sure ought to be able to figure out in the state where my front door is. The biggest revenue gain that we had in the state last year was sales tax on people's internet purchases. I introduced a bill that said send those sales tax, 18.5%, back to every county they come from, and let the supervisors there deal with the bridges and infrastructure there. That's what needs to happen, is we need to be giving it back instead of keeping it here in a general fund.
So, Adam, what do you think about their response to dealing with infrastructure and how they want to pay for it? They got a little more detailed, I guess. You kind of touched on it a little earlier.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, so Delbert's taking this kind of more local option approach where, kind of almost like the state flag issue, you want to push it to kind of other people, push it to the local, and let people make, decisions kind of not in Jackson, I think is kind of what he's trying to say. And if a county feels like they need more revenue for roads and bridges, they can enact that tax revenue. The revenue question is a lot of times how voters hear it, right? If you said, well, hey, would you want to pay another 5 cents a gallon in gasoline? Some people might say, well, hey, that doesn't sound so bad. But if you say, well, would you pay another $400 a year in gas tax? People are like, oh, wait a minute, that's a different, and so it's a lot about it's how voters hear the question and how they interpret, okay, what am I being really asked to do here?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that approach will work in putting it back to the counties, or do you think?
I think it's possible. I mean, it's just been kind of rolled out, so I think think it's incumbent on Delbert Hoseman to kind of put a little bit more meat on the bone with regards to that process. I mean, it literally seems to have just been rolled out today, and so I think he's going to have to kind of litigate that publicly through the pendency of the campaign to see what voters think.
Because, you know, every county, supervisors, all that, it can be very different and looked at differently like that. Go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say, I think it was either 2 or 3 sessions ago, House Speaker Philip Gunn himself proposed this local option gasoline tax increase, if I'm not mistaken. And that was part of a larger infrastructure plan, so that wasn't the sole proposal that he put out there. That's interesting to me, especially, you know, even 2 years after that was at least first proposed by the Speaker. One of the chief criticisms that you've heard from a lot of conservatives across the state, certainly including in the legislature and legislative leadership, about just a flat increase across the state in the gasoline tax is, well, you know, not every county has the exact same problems when it comes to infrastructure. So take Madison County. I think last time I saw they had 1 or 2 closed bridges, and they were working on those, and they have the tax revenue at the county level to work on those, whereas you have a county like Washington County that has more than 30 bridges closed, and they have been closed for at least 2 years now, and the tax revenue in a county like that just isn't there. So I think that local option tax increase that Secretary Hoseman has proposed tonight, I think that might actually play, and I think there's an appetite within the legislature, at least as it exists, has existed the last 4 years, to at least consider something like that.
All right. News 12's Gerald Harris now joins us live with Delbert Hoseman with his thoughts on the debate. Gerald?
That's right. I'm joined by Secretary of State Delbert Hoseman, who's vying to be the state's next lieutenant governor. Secretary Hoseman, did you get across your message to the voters tonight?
I think they heard what we had to say. These are real-life solutions to problems in Mississippi, not fluff. And so what you're hearing is the fact that we're asking our agencies other than education, child protective services, judiciary to take a 1% cut and then give that money back as a 3% pay raise to our hard-working mental health workers, our individuals that run our prisons, all of the things that needs to be done. You heard an education plan for teacher pay raises and pre-K to be funded this time. You heard how we can reorganize our government and come forward. All of the things that I think that we need to do on infrastructure, on education, they were all here. Mississippi, I have learned from being all over, is run in the counties, not in the capital. I want to give these boards of supervisors and these mayors the ability to replace those 436 bridges there without sending money to Jackson all the time and have it wintered away by 3, 5, 10, 15, 20% of overhead. We're not going to do that in the next administration. So I'm real pleased with our message today. And our career technical education, all the things that we've been proposing, I think are coming out. And these are solutions, I think, that Mississippians can actually look at and get their hands around.
There are a lot of similar ideas. Is there a different approach to these ideas?
Yeah, we're going to have a Republican Senate. I mean, there'll be 35 Republican senators, and so you'll see our approach being not only to take those, but to be all-inclusive. So we have all 52 senators going in the same direction as best we can. But when the things that I'm proposing, giving the counties the ability to fix their own roads and bridges, giving our teachers a pay raise, giving the people like our mental health workers income, which they desperately need, all of those are also positive things that Mississippians haven't heard before. I want to have every Thursday a press conference. I want our committee meetings to be broadcast website again, so transparency and people won't be snuck up on. So you don't have to leave your kitchen table to find out what's going on at the Capitol.
All right. Republican Secretary of State Hoseman vying to be the next lieutenant governor. He's taking on Jay Hughes in November 5th election. Back to you, Mel and Byron.
All right. Thank you very much, Gerald. Gentlemen, your thoughts on that? The transparency thing, once again, very interesting. Every Thursday press conference.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
That's a very good thing.
And he mentioned, he kind of alluded to it, and this really this point hadn't hit home, that there's going to be an enormous amount of change in the state Senate. I think there's already 14 or 15 seats that we know are going to turn over. Election day is going to come, no telling what's going to happen. And one of the bigger issues that's going to be kind of an elephants and donkeys issue is going to be redistricting, which is an enormous issue that will set the course of the state for the next decade. That's just one of those kind of political issues that I think you're going to start to see creeping up in the conversation in terms of coming down the home stretch of this race.
Interesting.
Anna?
I'm trying so hard not to go here, but I can't help it. I mean, I'm just listening to his interview just now, and after hearing his debate, I mean, what was it, 3 weeks ago at this very table, you had Tate Reeves and Bill Waller, maybe 4 weeks ago. Time blurs together here. Delbert Hoseman, a lot of his policy is sounding a lot like Bill Waller's to me. And that's going to be interesting if you're, we can't not talk about the change of the state Senate next year. That is going to be a really big deal. But of course, you're going to have a change from the top level of government as well. So we're going to have a new governor. And if Republicans have their way, that's going to be Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves. If Republicans have their way in the lieutenant governor's race, it's going to be Delbert Hoseman. Delbert Hoseman having similar policy ideas on Medicaid, teacher pay, and infrastructure with the gas tax increase. All three of those things, Tate Reeves has kind of drawn a hard line in the sand on, especially over the last month, and certainly when the runoff between Waller and Reeves was going on. So I am also, as I'm thinking about the Senate changing, I'm also thinking about that top level of leadership changing and wondering how a Governor Reeves and Lieutenant Governor Hoseman might work together.
Could be
Speaker
a clash.
Gunn, what role would he play?
That's a great question too. I mean, he is another sort of very independent thinker. He hasn't been afraid to, butt heads with Tate Reeves or Phil Bryant over the last 8 years. These three men who, like I said earlier about Secretary Hoseman, of course, we know Tate Reeves is this way too. They have their own leadership style, and they're very, very sort of autonomous in that. They have their close circles. They have their own sort of factions within the party. That sets up for a really interesting, I think, next 4 years if Reeves and Hoseman are elected, and if Gunn is reelected Speaker by the House.
Do you agree with that, Allen?
Yeah, no, generally I do. I think, I think Gunn's reelection as Speaker is a pretty assured sort of thing. The Lieutenant Governor is the most powerful position in the state of Mississippi by constitutional statute, or however you want to put it.
We've been saying that, but I think people really need to hear
no,
that.
No, it really is. From a policy perspective, it's
Right.
the job. And I think, Hughes and Hoseman are both kind of policy guys. I mean, I think they both want their hands on the levers of that policy debate. You mentioned the Waller and the Reeves debate. On election night, one of the things that Tate Reeves said, we can do both. We can raise teacher pay and kind of have some fiscal sanity. We can fix our roads and so I don't know that there's an enormous amount of difference between if Hoseman and Reeves become the top two statewide elected officials. One thing I know about both of those men is they can do math, and this is all a big math equation, right? In terms of how what do you prioritize, and how do you what does revenue do, and how do you push those bills through the process. And I think at the end of the day, they may have different styles, but at the end of the day, I think that they can probably actually work okay together.
Alan, what does Mr. Hoseman have to do going forward as we hit to November 5th?
I think he has a pretty heady advantage at this point. I think just by virtue of name ID, he's Republican, he's well funded. I think his goal is just to kind of run his process. He's been elected statewide 3 times before. And I don't think he's going to try to get crafty or do anything interesting with regards to the politics that he runs. I think he's going to be rolling out a kind of a steady stream of policy proposals. We'll see how the voters like them.
And Adam, what does Hughes have to do moving forward?
Well, I'm not a political operative. I don't make those big bucks to make those calls for the candidates. But as a reporter who has covered Jay Hughes for the last 3 years, I mean, this every common man, however you want to put it, this everyman approach that we heard a little bit from him tonight, I expect that he's going to stick to that. I mean, being a Democrat in Mississippi is tough, period. Especially when you're facing a very, very popular Republican in the state like Delbert Hoseman. Name ID through the roof, as Alan mentioned, funding through the roof. If you're Jay Hughes, I think your bet here has to continue to be, look, I have solutions to these very real problems. What's interesting to me, and as we heard tonight really for the first time so directly, was I'm not sure that Hughes's policy solutions to some problems are different enough from Hoseman's to really give him that extra advantage. So we'll see.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us. Such good insight.
Thank you.
And thank you all at home for watching us tonight and for following us on social media. Remember, the general election is on November 5th. You can find more information about the election on our website, WJTV.com. And thank you for joining us tonight on WJTV 12 News. Good night, everyone.